The amber dust of New Prometheus swirled outside the reinforced windows of Research Complex Delta, a testament to the harsh environment that humanity continued to challenge. Dr. Elena Rodriguez pressed her palm against the biometric scanner, her weathered fingers leaving a momentary impression of decades spent pushing the boundaries of human understanding. Inside the lab, holographic displays flickered with intricate genetic sequences, a constellation of data points that most would dismiss as incomprehensible chaos. But Elena saw something different. Where others saw random genetic noise, she perceived patterns, subtle, almost imperceptible threads of potential waiting to be understood. Dr. Rodriguez called out Dr. Marcus Chen, her lead research assistant. The latest genomic comparison results are complete. He approached, his augmented reality contact lenses projecting additional data directly into his field of vision. "You're not going to believe this." Elena turned, her dark eyes intense with that particular blend of scientific curiosity and intuition that had defined her entire career. At 52, she bore the marks of a lifetime spent in extreme research environments, a faint scar above her left eyebrow from a lab accident on Europa, skin slightly weathered from years of working in artificial environments, but with a sharpness of mind that seemed to defy age. "Show me," she said simply. The holographic display shifted, revealing a complex genetic map. Most of it looked like standard human DNA, but there were anomalies, sections that seemed to pulse with a strange, almost living potential. Marcus manipulated the display, zooming into specific genetic markers. "We've identified a series of dormant genetic sequences that don't match any known human genetic profile," Marcus explained. "They're not junk DNA, but they're not actively expressing either. It's like a genetic emergency brake." Elena leaned closer. The genetic sequence was unlike anything she'd seen in her 30 years of research. Most researchers would have dismissed it as an aberration, a quirk of genetic sampling. But Elena Rodriguez had built her reputation on finding meaning in the margins. New Prometheus was humanity's most challenging colony, a mining world with extreme temperature fluctuations, radiation levels that would kill most biological organisms, and environmental conditions that pushed the limits of human survival. The colony had become a testing ground for human adaptability, attracting researchers like Elena who were obsessed with understanding the limits of human potential. "Run a deeper analysis," Elena instructed. "Cross-reference with our environmental stress response databases. I want to know why these sequences are dormant." The research complex hummed with sophisticated equipment. Outside, massive mining machines carved through the planet's crust, extracting rare minerals that fueled humanity's expansion across the stars. New Prometheus was more than a colony, it was a statement. Humanity would not be confined, would not be limited by traditional biological constraints. Hours passed. Coffee grew cold. Data accumulated. "Elena," Marcus said suddenly, his voice different. "These sequences, they're not just dormant, they're waiting." She understood immediately. Some genetic sequences were like seeds, waiting for the right environmental trigger to activate. But these were different. These seemed to contain something more, a potential that defied current scientific understanding. A communication alert interrupted their work. The colony's administrative AI, a sophisticated system named AI, projected a holographic message. "Incoming transmission from Galactic Confederation Research Oversight Committee," the AI announced in its neutral tone. Elena suppressed a sardonic smile. The Galactic Confederation, a bureaucratic network of alien species that view humanity as a young, somewhat promising, but ultimately unremarkable civilization. They funded a fraction of human research, more out of diplomatic courtesy than genuine interest. The transmission would be another routine report, another set of guidelines, another reminder of humanity's perceived limitations. Little did they know that in this small research complex, on this harsh mining world, something extraordinary was about to be discovered, something that would make the stars themselves tremble. Elena Rodriguez looked at the genetic sequence, a strange feeling rising within her. Anticipation, excitement, And something else, a primal understanding that they were on the verge of understanding something fundamental about human potential. "Continue the analysis," she told Marcus, "and tell no one outside this lab." The first warning came not as a sound, but as a subtle disruption in the electromagnetic spectrum. Araya, the colony's AI, went from passive monitoring to full alert in less than a millisecond, a speed that would have been impossible for any organic intelligence. "Incoming unidentified vessels." Araya's voice cut through the research complex's main communication channels. "Signature does not match any known Galactic Confederation or human registry." Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already moving before the AI finished speaking. Years of working on the frontier had taught her that hesitation meant death. She grabbed her emergency comlink, fingers flying across its quantum-encrypted surface. "Marcus, initiate lockdown protocol Omega-7," she commanded, her voice calm but urgent. Outside the research complex's reinforced walls, new Prometheus transformed. Mining rigs that moments ago had been extracting rare minerals now became potential defensive positions. Automated turrets emerged from concealed locations, their targeting systems coming online with predatory precision. The first visual confirmation came seconds later. Void Weaver ships, biomechanical monstrosities that defied traditional understanding of spacecraft design. They weren't constructed, they were grown. Massive organic metal hybrids that pulsed with an alien intelligence, their surfaces shifting and adapting like living tissue. Tactical assessment, Elena demanded of Araya. The AI's response was brutally direct. Defensive capabilities insufficient. Recommended action. Immediate evacuation. But Elena knew evacuation was impossible. New Prometheus wasn't just a colony. It was a critical resource hub. Losing it would cripple human expansion in this sector of the galaxy. The first wave of attack came not with weapons, but with a biological assault. Nano-organic infiltrators began to dissolve the colony's outer defenses, eating through molecular bonds like a cancer-consuming healthy tissue. These weren't conventional weapons. They were a form of technological warfare that pushed the boundaries between biology and machinery. "Dr. Rodriguez," Marcus's voice crackled over the comlink. "The genetic samples we were studying, they're reacting to the environmental stress." Through the reinforced windows, Elena watched as the first wave of Void Weaver ground troops materialized. They were nightmares of biological engineering, creatures that seemed to flow between solid and liquid states, their bodies a horrifying fusion of organic matter and technological augmentation. Standing 7 feet tall, with bodies that seemed to breathe and pulse with an internal mechanism, the Void Weavers moved with a precision that suggested a hive-mind intelligence. Each one was a weapon, each movement calculated to maximum efficiency. Elena's mind raced. The Void Weavers weren't just an invasion force, they were a statement, a demonstration of technological superiority designed to break human resistance before it could truly begin. "Araya," Elena called out. "Activate the experimental defense protocols. Route all available power to the research complex's protective systems." The colony's defensive grid was unlike anything in standard military doctrine. Developed by researchers like Elena, it was a hybrid system that blended technological defense with biological adaptation principles. Each defensive node was designed to learn, to adapt, to evolve in real time. The first Void Weaver ground troops reached the research complex's outer perimeter. They moved with a liquid grace, weapons that were part of their bodies shifting and changing with each step. Then something unexpected happened. The colony's defensive systems didn't just respond, they anticipated. Turret systems that should have been overwhelmed began to adjust their targeting with impossible speed. Defensive barriers shifted molecular structure, becoming momentarily transparent to allow specific energy frequencies through, then instantly hardening to block incoming attacks. "Impossible," Marcus whispered, watching the tactical displays. But Elena understood. The genetic markers they'd been studying, the dormant sequences, they were beginning to react. Not just in the human defenders, but in the colony's entire defensive infrastructure. The Void Weavers had come expecting a simple conquest. They found something else entirely. As the first wave of attack crashed against New Prometheus's defenses, Elena Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. Whatever burned in human blood was about to make these invaders understand the true meaning of adaptation. The battle for New Prometheus had begun. Pain became language. Transformation became survival. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched in a state of horrified fascination as the first human defenders began to change. It wasn't a gradual process. It was an explosion of biological potential, compressed into seconds of raw, visceral metamorphosis. Private James Chen, Marcus's younger brother and a standard colonial defense trooper, was the first to fully manifest the change. One moment he was a standard human soldier, standard-issue combat armor struggling against the Void Weaver assault. The next, he was something else entirely. Muscle fibers didn't just expand. They'd rewove themselves. Neural pathways that had been dormant suddenly blazed with impossible connectivity. His skin developed a subtle iridescence, molecular structures realigning to provide unprecedented protection against both physical and energy-based attacks. The metamorphosis protocol is activating, Marcus said, his voice a mixture of scientific wonder and primal terror. But this is beyond our initial projections. The genetic marker they'd discovered wasn't just a defensive mechanism. It was a complete systemic rewrite of human biological potential. Private Chen moved first, not with the mechanical precision of a trained soldier, but with a fluidity that suggested his entire understanding of movement had been fundamentally altered. When a Void Weaver infantry unit, a horrific biomechanical construct that could liquefy and reform at will, attacked, Chen didn't just dodge. He anticipated. His body generated localized electromagnetic fields that disrupted the Void Weaver's molecular cohesion. Where standard human weapons would have bounced off the aliens' adaptive armor, Chen's mere presence began to unravel their biological machinery. Energy signatures are off the charts, Araya reported, the AI's neutral tone unable to mask the underlying shock. Biological adaptation exceeding all known human evolutionary parameters. Elena understood what was happening at a molecular level. The genetic sequences they'd discovered weren't just dormant. They were a failsafe, a radical adaptation protocol embedded in human DNA, waiting for the precise combination of environmental stress, threat, and genetic trigger. More colonial defenders began to change, their bodies becoming conduits of an evolutionary leap that defied conventional understanding. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, Elena's own daughter and a third-generation colonial defense specialist, was next. Her transformation was more controlled, suggesting a genetic predisposition that went beyond random mutation. Nerve clusters expanded outside her spine, creating external sensory networks that could process environmental data at speeds that would drive a standard biological brain into complete overload. Her eyes developed additional retinal layers, capable of perceiving electromagnetic spectrums far beyond human or Void Weaver capabilities. It's a quantum leap in biological adaptation, Marcus muttered, fingers flying across holographic interfaces. Not just physical change, but a complete recalibration of sensory and cognitive capabilities. The Void Weavers realized something was wrong approximately 17.3 seconds into the attack. Their initial assault, designed to overwhelm through superior technological and biological integration, began to falter. Human defenders who moments ago were struggling now moved with a precision that suggested they were fighting less as individuals and more as a collective organism. Their bodies generated localized energy fields, created molecular disruption patterns, and adapted to incoming attacks with a speed that made traditional combat tactics obsolete. Metamorphosis protocol is not just defensive, Elena realized, watching the tactical displays. It's a complete evolutionary response to existential threat. The research complex became ground zero for the most significant biological transformation in human history. Void Weaver ground troops that had effortlessly conquered dozens of civilizations found themselves facing something entirely unexpected. Humans who were changing. Humans who were evolving. humans who were refusing to be conquered. Private Chen looked up, meeting Elena's gaze through the reinforced windows of the research complex. His eyes, no longer completely human, no longer entirely alien, held a message that needed no translation. This was only the beginning. The metamorphosis had begun. The research data streamed in like a tsunami of biological revelation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display that pulsed with unprecedented genetic information. The transformation wasn't random. It was a meticulously orchestrated dance of molecular potential that defied everything humanity had previously understood about evolutionary adaptation. Each subject is developing unique adaptive capabilities, Marcus noted, his hands moving through the holographic data streams. But there's an underlying pattern. The common language of adaptation. The first comprehensive analysis revealed something extraordinary. The genetic marker they'd discovered wasn't just a single sequence, but a complex network of dormant genetic potential, a biological quantum computer embedded within human DNA. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez had become their primary subject of study. Her transformed body was a living laboratory of evolutionary possibility. Where standard human biology would have collapsed under the stress of rapid genetic modification, she demonstrated not just survival, but extraordinary functionality. Her neural network had expanded beyond traditional brain matter. Synaptic connections now existed outside her central nervous system, creating a distributed intelligence that could process information at speeds that made quantum computers look primitive. External nerve clusters allowed her to interface directly with technological systems, reading and manipulating electronic signatures with a thought. "It's not enhancement," Elena muttered, more to herself than to Marcus. "It's activation. As if human DNA contains an entire blueprint of potential that we've never understood." The Void Weaver's initial assault had become a catalyst. The genetic sequences weren't responding to the invasion. They were responding to the fundamental concept of existential threat. Each transformed human became a unique expression of survival potential. Private James Chen demonstrated capabilities that challenged the very definition of biological limitation. His body could now generate localized energy fields that could disrupt molecular bonds. Where a standard weapon would require precise targeting, Chen could destabilize entire biomechanical constructs with a mere gesture. But the most fascinating discovery went beyond individual capabilities. The transformed humans were developing a form of collective intelligence, not a hive mind in the traditional sense, but a networked awareness that allowed instantaneous tactical and strategic communication. Battlefield coordination became less about radio signals and more about a kind of quantum entanglement of consciousness. "The Void Weavers don't understand what they're facing," Marcus said, a note of pride emerging in his scientific detachment. Elena understood the deeper implication. This wasn't just a defensive adaptation. It was a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to be human. Galactic Confederation monitoring stations began to pick up the unusual signals. Alien researchers who had long categorized humanity as a developing species found their databases becoming obsolete in real time. The first comprehensive report from the transformed defenders revealed capabilities that seemed to blur the line between biology and technology. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez could interface with colony defense systems at a molecular level, her neural network becoming a living, adaptive firewall that could predict and neutralize incoming threats before they'd fully materialized. "We're seeing the emergence of a new form of intelligence," Elena recorded in her primary research log. "Not artificial, not purely biological, but a hybrid form of existence that challenges our previous understanding of adaptation." The Void Weavers' initial invasion had become a crucible. What they intended as a swift conquest was transforming into something entirely unexpected. Each attempt to overcome the human defenders resulted in further genetic activation, each attack becoming a mechanism of evolutionary acceleration. Private Chen's team could now generate localized gravitational fields, manipulate electromagnetic spectrums, and communicate through quantum entanglement. Their bodies were no longer just biological entities. They were living, breathing quantum computers with the ability to rewrite their own genetic code in real time. "This is what potential looks like," Elena whispered, watching the holographic displays. The stars themselves seemed to pause, as if understanding that something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer just another species in the vast galactic ecosystem. They had become something else entirely. An echo of potential that would forever change the understanding of life itself. The Galactic Confederation's central deliberation chamber fell silent. Holographic representations of 17 different species flickered around the circular platform, each delegate processing the incoming data with varying degrees of shock, fear, and disbelief. The transmission from New Prometheus played again, a recording that was rapidly becoming the most studied piece of intelligence in galactic history. Ambassador Krulax of the Sonorian Collective was the first to break the silence. His crystalline exoskeleton shifted colors, a biological tell of extreme emotional response. "This is impossible," he stated, his translation matrix rendering the words with clinical precision. "Humans cannot have achieved this level of adaptive potential." The archival curator of the Quantum Collective, a being composed of interconnected energy matrices, responded with cold calculation. "Data confirms unprecedented genetic transformation. Probability matrices suggest this is not an isolated incident, but a fundamental characteristic of human genetic structure." Dr. Elena Rodriguez's research logs played on repeat. Each frame revealed another layer of the extraordinary genetic potential that had been dormant within human DNA. The transformed defenders of New Prometheus were no longer simply soldiers. They were living proof of a biological potential that defied every known galactic classification. "We've monitored human species for 3 galactic cycles," spoke Shireen, the Quantum Collective's primary diplomat. They were categorized as a developing civilization, technologically promising, but fundamentally limited. The irony was not lost on the assembled representatives. What had begun as a routine Voidweaver invasion had become a fundamental challenge to every existing understanding of biological adaptation. The human defenders weren't just surviving. They were evolving in real time, transforming their very genetic structure to meet existential threats. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez's latest transmission provided the most compelling evidence. Her neural network had developed capabilities that blurred the line between biological intelligence and quantum computing. She could interface with colony systems, predict tactical movements with impossible accuracy, and generate localized energy fields that disrupted even the most advanced Voidweaver biomechanical constructs. "The genetic sequence we discovered is not a mutation," Dr. Elena Rodriguez's recorded analysis played. "It's a quantum survival mechanism, a blueprint of potential that activates under extreme environmental stress." The Galactic Confederation's diplomatic channels began to fracture. Some species advocated for immediate containment, treating humans as a potential existential threat. Others saw an opportunity for unprecedented scientific collaboration. Ambassador Krulax's holographic representation pulsed with agitation. If this genetic potential is reproducible, humans could destabilize the entire galactic power structure. They cannot be allowed to develop this capability further. But the archival curator offered a different perspective. Correction. Humans have always possessed this potential. They simply lack the environmental trigger to activate it. The transmission from New Prometheus continued to play. Transformed human defenders moved with a grace and precision that defied traditional understanding of biological limitation. They were no longer fighting. They were evolving in real time, each encounter with the Voidweavers becoming another opportunity for genetic adaptation. Private James Chen's tactical reports revealed capabilities that challenged every existing military doctrine. His team could generate gravitational disruptions, manipulate electromagnetic spectrums, and communicate through quantum entanglement. Their bodies were living quantum computers, capable of rewriting their own genetic code in milliseconds. "We are witnessing the emergence of a new form of intelligence," the Quantum Collective's analysis concluded. "Not artificial, not purely biological, but a hybrid form of existence that represents a quantum leap in evolutionary potential." The Galactic Confederation found itself at a crossroads. The humans they had long considered a developing species had just demonstrated a capacity for adaptation that made every existing galactic classification obsolete. As the deliberations continued, one thing became abundantly clear. Humanity was no longer just another species in the galactic ecosystem. They had become something else entirely. A variable that no one had anticipated. A potential that would forever change the understanding of life itself. The truth revealed itself in layers of quantum complexity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the heart of what had once been a standard research laboratory, and was now something entirely different. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with an energy that defied conventional scientific understanding. Here, in the crucible of New Prometheus, the true nature of the genetic marker was finally coming into focus. "It's not just adaptation," Elena murmured, her fingers tracing holographic projections of genetic sequences that seemed to dance and shift with living intelligence. "It's a complete evolutionary architecture." The genetic marker they'd discovered was nothing short of a biological quantum computer, a dormant system of potential hardwired into human DNA. Not a mutation, not an anomaly, but a fundamental survival mechanism that had been waiting, potentially for millennia, to be activated. Marcus Chen worked beside her, his augmented neural interfaces allowing him to process information at speeds that would have been impossible months ago. The transformation wasn't limited to the combat-deployed personnel. Researchers, support staff, even civilian colonists were experiencing varying degrees of genetic activation. "Look at this," Marcus said, highlighting a particularly complex genetic sequence. The marker isn't just responding to external threats. It's learning, evolving. Each interaction becomes part of its adaptive memory. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez demonstrated the most advanced manifestation of this potential. Her body was now a living interface between biological and technological systems. Neural clusters extended beyond her central nervous system, creating a distributed intelligence that could interface with colony systems, predict tactical movements, and generate localized energy fields with mere thought. The implications were staggering. Humans were no longer just biological entities. They had become quantum adaptive systems, living, breathing computational networks that could rewrite their own genetic code in real time. "We're seeing the emergence of a new form of existence," Elena recorded in her primary research log. "Not artificial intelligence, not pure biological life, but a hybrid form of adaptive potential that challenges every existing understanding of evolution." Private James Chen's transformation provided the most dramatic evidence. His body could now generate gravitational disruptions, manipulate electromagnetic spectrums at will, and communicate through quantum entanglement. Where standard human communication relied on external technology, Chen could now transmit complex tactical information through a form of neurological quantum signaling. But the most profound discovery went beyond individual capabilities. The transformed humans were developing a collective adaptive intelligence, not a hive mind in the traditional sense, but a networked awareness that allowed instantaneous tactical and strategic communication. Battlefield coordination had become a form of quantum consciousness, a shared awareness that transcended individual limitation. The genetic marker is a survival protocol, Elena realized. But it's more than that. It's a complete evolutionary blueprint. Each encounter with the Void Weavers became another opportunity for genetic learning. Where traditional biological systems would have collapsed under the stress of rapid modification, these humans demonstrated not just survival, but extraordinary functionality. Their bodies generated adaptive neural networks that could process information across multiple spectrums simultaneously. Synaptic connections existed outside traditional brain matter, creating a distributed intelligence that made quantum computers look primitive by comparison. "We are witnessing the activation of a dormant evolutionary potential," Marcus noted, his scientific detachment barely masking the sense of wonder. "Humans aren't just adapting. They're remembering something fundamental about their own biological architecture." The research complex had become something more than a laboratory. It was a living experiment in the nature of evolution itself. Walls could shift molecular structure, defensive systems became extensions of human neural networks, and the very concept of technological interface dissolved into something more organic, more alive. Elena understood the deeper implication. This wasn't just a defensive adaptation. It was a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to be human. "We are not changing," she whispered, watching the holographic displays pulse with living genetic information. "We are remembering." The stars outside seemed to pause, as if understanding that something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer just another species in the vast galactic ecosystem. They had become a quantum variable, an evolutionary potential that would forever rewrite the understanding of life itself. The war entered its most critical phase as the transformed humans became a force that defied every known principle of combat and survival. The Void Weavers brought their most advanced weaponry, technologies that had systematically dismantled countless civilizations across the galaxy, biomechanical constructs that could liquefy and reform, energy weapons that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level, quantum disruption fields that should have torn apart any biological system. They found something else entirely. The battle for the outer colonies became a laboratory of evolutionary potential. Where previous encounters would have resulted in total planetary destruction, humans transformed the very concept of resistance. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez led a strike team that was no longer just a military unit. They were a living, adaptive organism. Her neural network had expanded beyond individual limitation, creating a tactical consciousness that could predict Void Weaver movements with impossible accuracy. "They're not just attacking," Sarah communicated through the quantum neural network, her thoughts translating instantly to her team. "They're testing us." Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the research complex, monitoring every quantum fluctuation, every genetic adaptation. The transformed humans were no longer fighting with traditional weapons. They were becoming the weapons. Private James Chen demonstrated capabilities that made previous understanding of biological warfare obsolete. His body could generate localized gravitational disruptions that could crush Void Weaver biomechanical constructs. Electromagnetic fields erupted from his neural clusters, creating defensive and offensive capabilities that shifted in milliseconds. The Void Weaver's initial strategy of overwhelming force became increasingly ineffective. Each attack was met not with resistance, but with adaptation. Human defenders didn't just survive. They evolved in real time, their genetic potential expanding with each encounter. Entire planetary defense systems became extensions of human neural networks. Technological infrastructure merged with biological potential, creating a form of collective intelligence that was neither purely technological nor purely biological. "We are seeing the emergence of a new form of existence," Elena recorded in her primary research log. "A quantum adaptive system that challenges every existing understanding of life, technology, and survival." The outer colonies became a crucible of evolutionary potential. Planets that should have been destroyed became testing grounds for a new form of collective survival. Humans transformed environments as easily as they transformed themselves, generating localized ecosystems that could adapt to the most extreme conditions. Void Weaver assault teams found themselves facing opponents that didn't just fight back. They reimagined the very concept of conflict. Neural networks expanded beyond individual bodies, creating a collective awareness that could process tactical information across multiple spectrums simultaneously. Marcus Chen's research revealed the deeper truth. The genetic marker wasn't just a survival mechanism. It was a complete evolutionary blueprint, a dormant potential that had been waiting for the right environmental trigger. "They're not just fighting," Marcus noted, analyzing the quantum data streams. "They're remembering something fundamental about their own existence." The battle moved beyond traditional concepts of warfare. Humans could now generate energy fields that disrupted Void Weaver molecular structures, communicate through quantum entanglement, and adapt their very genetic code in real time. Sarah Rodriguez's strike team became the epitome of this new form of existence. They could interface directly with technological systems, generate defensive capabilities that shifted molecular structure instantaneously, and communicate through a form of neural quantum signaling that made traditional communication look primitive. As the conflict expanded, the Galactic Confederation watched in a state of collective shock. The humans they had long considered a developing species were demonstrating a capacity for adaptation that rewrote every existing understanding of biological potential. "We are not just surviving," Sarah communicated through the quantum network. "We are becoming." The Void Weavers found themselves facing an enemy that was no longer confined by traditional biological limitations. Each assault became another opportunity for genetic learning, another chance to expand the boundaries of evolutionary potential. Planets became living laboratories. Colonies transformed into adaptive ecosystems. Humans were no longer just fighting a war. They were rewriting the very understanding of survival itself. The stars trembled, bearing witness to a transformation that would forever change the nature of life in the galaxy. The final confrontation was not a battle. It was a revelation. The quantum neural network that connected the transformed humans pulsed with a collective consciousness that transcended individual limitation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter, her body now a living conduit of evolutionary potential that bridged biological and technological boundaries. The Void Weavers' primary collective, a massive biomechanical intelligence that had conquered hundreds of civilizations, found itself facing an opponent that defied every existing understanding of resistance. "We are not fighting," Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez communicated through the quantum network, her thoughts translating across multiple spectrums of consciousness. "We are evolving." The battlefield was no longer confined to physical space. It existed in quantum potentialities, in the very fabric of genetic potential that humans had only begun to understand. Where the Void Weavers saw conquest, humans saw an opportunity for transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's research had revealed the deepest truth. The genetic marker was not just a survival mechanism. It was a quantum blueprint of potential that had been waiting, potentially for millennia, to be activated. Private James Chen led a strike team that was no longer just a military unit. They were a living, adaptive organism, a collective intelligence that could generate gravitational disruptions, manipulate electromagnetic spectrums, and communicate through quantum entanglement with a precision that made traditional warfare look like primitive conflict. The Void Weavers' most advanced weapons became obsolete. Energy fields that should have disintegrated matter at the molecular level were absorbed, understood, and then reimagined by the transformed humans. Their bodies were no longer just biological entities. They were living quantum computers, capable of rewriting their own genetic code in real time. "We are remembering," Elena communicated through the collective neural network. "Remembering something fundamental about the nature of existence. Entire planetary ecosystems became extensions of human potential. Colonies transformed from defensive positions to adaptive laboratories of evolutionary possibility. The very concept of technological infrastructure dissolved into a living, breathing network of quantum potential. The Galactic Confederation watched in a state of collective shock. The humans they had long considered a developing species were demonstrating a capacity for adaptation that rewrote every existing understanding of biological potential. Marcus Chen's final analysis revealed the profound truth. The genetic marker was not just unique to this moment. It was a fundamental characteristic of human potential that had been waiting for the right environmental trigger. "We are not changing," Sarah communicated, her consciousness expanding across multiple spectrums of perception. "We are becoming." The Void Weavers' collective intelligence began to fracture. Faced with an opponent that could not be categorized, could not be defeated through traditional means of conquest, they encountered something entirely unexpected. Adaptation that was not just defensive, but fundamental. Potential that was not just reactive, but transformative. The final confrontation became a quantum dance of evolutionary potential. Humans did not just resist. They reimagined the very concept of conflict, of survival, of existence itself. Planetary defense systems became living extensions of human neural networks. Technological infrastructure merged with biological potential, creating a form of collective intelligence that was neither purely technological nor purely biological. "We are not conquering," Elena communicated through the quantum network. "We are understanding." The stars themselves seemed to pause, bearing witness to a transformation that would forever change the nature of life in the galaxy. Humans were no longer just another species. They had become a quantum variable, an evolutionary potential that defied every existing understanding. As the Void Weavers' collective intelligence began to disintegrate, humans demonstrated a capacity for survival that went beyond mere resistance. They absorbed, they understood, they transformed. The final moment of confrontation was not a victory in the traditional sense. It was a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to be alive, to exist, to evolve. "We are not fighting," the collective human consciousness communicated. "We are remembering." And in that remembering, they rewrote the very understanding of life itself. The stars trembled. Humanity had awakened.